Hello and welcome to Creative Connect. For those that I haven't met, I'm not sure if I've met Karen and Naomi. I'm Janine Matheson. I'm the director at Glasgow Connected Arts Network. And yeah, delighted to have you with us this morning. And also delighted to have Callie with us today. Callie is a multi-instrumentalist, experimental musician and conceptual artist. And we're delighted that she's happy to share with us her experience of using Patreon as a forum to kind of build community around her work and as another way of sustaining her practice or bringing income into her practice. So I'm really excited to hear what Callie's going to talk to us about. Just before we kind of start, I've got a few sort of housekeeping-y, Zoomy things to go through, so please bear with me. So Creative Connect, if you haven't been before, is our relaxed monthly gathering that we do every month. It's a place for our network of creatives to connect with one another, to share sort of advice and maybe things that are happening within their practice or their work. And a place really where we can get inspiration from our guest speakers as well. So we speak to our members about areas that perhaps they're finding challenging or they want more advice or information about, and then we look at creatives in our network that are doing interesting things that can kind of share their experience with us. So it's a very supportive, non-hierarchical kind of event. So we want everyone to get as much as you can out of it. So it's very informal, and I'm sure Callie will not mind if we interrupt her with questions and things that we want to ask. So please do use this time how you need to. We'd like everyone to feel comfortable, so I am recording, so if you want to switch off your camera at any point, please do so. We're only together for an hour. It's a really short, sharp burst of inspiration on a Tuesday morning, so if you do need a comfort break or anything, please do kind of listen to your body and do what you need to do and come back. That's fine. Yeah, I think that's actually, I've covered everything. Does anyone have any questions or anything before I hand over to lovely Callie? Okay, great. Callie, I'm going to hand over to you, if that's okay.
Okay, cool. Hello, everyone. It's lovely to meet you all. I was saying to Janine in the waiting room how I think it seems the antithesis of a creative meetup to be in the morning. But, you know, we move. I'm really grateful to be speaking to you all. I feel like it's the femme artist struggle is constantly downplaying your achievements. So I don't feel well placed to be speaking to you, but yeah, Janine very much so reassured me that I am. She's lovely, but I basically have been working on Patreon for over 3 years now, but I am, as Janine said, I'm a multidisciplinary artist and I have fingers in a lot of pies, creative pies, and I don't stop working. Basically, I just don't stop working on my art, and it's mostly musical stuff. I'm really getting into musique concrète lately, which is making music from non-musical samples, splicing together field recordings to make something melodic. And my latest release was funded by Help Musicians UK, which I think is really, really important to, on top of Patreon and passion economy things, to apply for as many grants as you can, because grants kind of form the spine of my practice, and it stops everything being a bit sort of like desperate, like trying desperately to gain pledges just for some sense of economic stability. But yeah, passion economy, if you don't know, is any like subscription-based modality of support network. So with Patreon, you have a group of supporters who will back you at certain tiers every month. And in exchange for that, you can give them exclusive work. And so I think it's really great for if you make episodic art form, like if you have an episodic art form, so like a podcast or a web series or a graphic novel, for example. And I'm sure I'll hear about all of your art forms later, but it is really, really useful to, if it's not episodic, to make it so. So there's lots of different ways you can do that. You can either diversify your practice and do lots of little different things, which is what I do, or you can stratify your existing practice by offering different levels of exclusivity, basically. So behind the scenes content versus actual finished mixes and masters and stuff like that. Yeah, it's not just Patreon. Patreon doesn't have the monopoly on passion economy. There's also Coffee, which is spelled Kofi, and Buy Me a Coffee. Lots of coffee references. But I would definitely recommend you shopping around for the different fees, because there's different, percentages of fees that they charge just for the admin of their site. I feel kind of lucky to have signed up to Patreon like 3 or 4 years ago, even before I was making anything on it, because their fees have increased every year. So I would really encourage you, if you don't have one of these platforms, if you're not on one of these platforms, just to do it, just to sign up to one of them once you've done your little comparison of what might be best for your particular practice. I would definitely recommend you just going for it and signing up. And it's the same thing with creative practice in general, right? You've got to just start and then let the art speak to you, and then it's a conversation, rather than having this very, very like rigid idea in your head of what it's going to be. I would just go for it, because these things, people are catching on to these things now, and as they do, the fees will increase for them, even just hosting your work. So yeah, that's probably the biggest, most important piece of advice I can give you. And yeah, like I said, think about how to make your practice stratified into the tiers, because you might have someone backing you at £3 a month who will get something that's slightly less valuable as someone backing you at £30 a month, for example. So my £30 tier is the vinyl tier. I have a vinyl coming out in summer, and everyone pledging at that tier will just automatically get a vinyl when it arrives. And I do lots of little, merchy things every now and again. I have stickers and cassette tapes, and I write little cards for them all, because they're like my little art family. It's really been so transformative for my practice to have this little tight-knit community. I've been working full-time on it basically for a year. And I say full-time, I'm working full-time on my whole practice, and that's like so chaotic. Janine will tell you, just so chaotic. And I think maybe my kind of cautionary tale that I can provide from that is just to not spread yourself too thin. It's, just because you can do things doesn't mean you always should. It might be better to just kind of, like I said, stratify your existing work rather than introducing new things. Because today on EHFM, I have my radio show episode is coming out today for Women's Day. Happy Women's Day, everyone. And that's another example of something that I offer. There's a radio show tier on my page. So those people in that tier get the radio show a bit early in the month, and also get an exclusive download of it. So yes, think about how you can stratify your practice. There is also a funnel involved. I hate to sound like businessy. I'm really sorry. It's gonna get a bit gross, but there really is a funnel. Like Patreon offer these workshops, these online workshops, where they give you the ins and outs of passion economy. So even if you don't actually work on Patreon, I would also encourage you just to sign up to Patreon to get emailed these workshop links, because they're so useful for any kind of passion economy modality. But in that, they told me about this funnel where at the top of the funnel, you have all of your social media followers, and that will be the biggest number. And then it goes down to your official website, and then eventually gets down to your Patreon or your passion economy platform. And so you've got to do everything you can to get the minimum amount of clicks from this level to this level, and to make it as accessible as possible for people to travel through the funnel. I think getting people on that top level is obviously, when you're first starting out, that's the most difficult part. And I think it's important for me, the most important thing has been vulnerability. And oh God, sorry to sound like RuPaul right now. We need to see more vulnerability. But yeah, unfortunately, that is the way it goes. I mean, for me at least, maybe your brand might be different. I would encourage you to think about your brand and what kind of fits in with that, what's cohesive with your brand. But for me, I'm a chaotic witch and hyper emotional, and all of that seeps through into my work, and not just my work, but also the way I share my work. And so with Instagram, for example, which is the social media platform I'm most au fait with, that is, yeah, I'm super vulnerable on that. And I've tried my best to make it kind of like aesthetically pleasing, and then mostly use my stories for actual like self-expression and everything, because unfortunately we do live in this society where social media is king for creatives, and having a good Instagram feed is kind of like a business card nowadays, and having something aesthetically pleasing can lead people to the next stage of the funnel, which for me is my official website, which has a call to action for signing up to the Patreon on the very, very top. So make sure that your call to action, which is just the button for pledging, is really, really visible on your website, because that's another way to just make it more accessible and make sure that people actually know where your Patreon is. Yeah, what else can I say? I'd say that, yeah, like I said about the grants, it's just doing grant applications has been really great for my Patreon work as well, because it helps me conceptualize in a bigger picture way the projects that I'm working on. And if it goes well, then you get some money at the end of it to do it. So then it's a bit less desperate. As I said, like, there's been months when I've been really, really trying to amass some more pledges on Patreon and stuff, and those are the months that I don't do so well. Yeah, I think that you just have to kind of be really, really present with it and make sure that you are making the work that you love, rather than trying to make something that will bring more followers and everything, which I think is just, that's the case for all of your practice, right? Just make sure you're following what calls you. Yeah, I briefly worked for Amanda Palmer, and I don't know if any of you know her, but she is very successful on Patreon, like exceedingly successful on Patreon, and is good at crowdfunding in general. And so getting advice from her was really, really useful. And a lot of that I've shared with you. I think that for me, Patreon was a really great kind of, like I said, add-on to my grant funding for the Help Musicians grant, because my studio share was like a certain amount a month, and my Patreon pledges covered that throughout the recording phase of my album. And that just offered such a sense of like relief from my anxiety about recording the album, and making sure I had a space every month to go and scream my lungs out, because my work is very abrasive and loud. And this tiny flat, the walls are too thin, or my neighbors can hear. So yeah, it can be a really great way to subsidize what you've got going on in your practice already. It's a fantastic way to build a sense of community, especially if you are kind of like, there's a political leaning to your work. It's a great way to stay safe as well. For me as a trans woman, it's like, oftentimes it's quite a struggle to decide what to share. And that's why I'm not that active on Twitter, because Twitter it can be a bit of a horrible place. And being vulnerable there is, it's always good to be vulnerable, but you do have to protect yourself and make sure that you set boundaries, with what you actually want to share. You know, I struggle with boundaries so much. If you hadn't noticed already in this tiny talk, I struggle a lot with boundaries and deciding what is appropriate and what is viable for my own mental well-being with regard to sharing stuff. And so, yeah, you know, Patreon's great for creating that little paywall. Like, it creates something that's like a little bit of a cozy wall around you all, so that you can be a little bit safer and curate what you share a bit more, because you can also just block, not that I've ever done this, but you can, in case you get any kind of like negative whatever, you can just block patrons if they're abusive or whatever. But that has never happened to me. I've never had it happening to anyone else. I would really say that it's, if anything, people, if they're supporting you on Patreon, they just want you to do well. They just want to support you. And yeah, just don't get so, you know, from my own experience, I think getting in my own head has been the biggest hindrance. And just having faith that these people just want to help you is really important, because they do. You know, that's what this whole thing is about. Yeah, I think that's everything. I would really just like to talk to all of you about what you do, and if there's anything I can help with, that would be really great.
Thank you so much. That was really amazing. I've got loads of questions, but I don't want
Cool.
to jump in straight away. Does anyone from the group have any questions for Kelly? Okay, I'm going to kick off then. um, you'd mentioned about the community that you've kind of built on Patreon has been quite transformative, and I
Yeah.
just wondered, because of our network, what connects us all are we're participatory creatives, so we're working in kind of co-creation and community settings, and yeah, so Patreon is an interesting model in how your community could influence your practice, and I just wondered if you could talk a little bit more about, you know, has your community, have they given you ideas almost to that
Yeah.
has influenced your practice, or yeah, could you
Yeah.
talk a bit about that?
Totally. That's a great question. I think that you know, like I said about your creative practice being in conversation with the art itself, this adds another dimension of conversationality, right? Like, it's there are polls that you can do on Patreon. I'm pretty sure the other passion economy platforms have a similar function, but you can do polls where people will vote on from different options. So for my radio show, for example, there's been a couple of times when I've been struggling to pick between certain tracks to include, or I've shared a bunch of stuff. Like, I do like download dumps where I like share all the stuff that I've been working on that month, and then ask them what they think would be viable to release as an actual EP. That has been really useful. But I think when, like I said, those kinds of conversations, I think that's more about people pleasing, and that's when it starts to kind of like lose a bit of traction. When it's more just about conversing about what people have been up to, and then allowing that to inspire you, and vice versa, I think that's much more valid. But obviously everyone is different. I do think that the poll kind of function of Patreon is really useful for deciding between merch items, for example. So if you're going to print merch and you have multiple designs, then obviously it's the patrons are the first ones that you ask. Like, I will ask people on Instagram stories and stuff, but the poll on Patreon is the first one that goes out, and then that helps me narrow down options a bit more. It's kind of like the reverse of the funnel. And yeah, just like I said about the whole having the little bubble, because you know that these people are just supporting you and your work rather than supporting you for any outward facing reason, which again I think can be quite a worry for me all the time, and I don't know how valid that worry is, how based in rationality that worry is. But I often do worry about this like performative aspect of support, with me being trans, it's like so oftentimes I think I'm worried, and this is obviously, you know, again, it comes into the whole internalized misogyny of just being a femme creative and doubting yourself. But I think often I worry that people are just supporting me because they want to see as being supportive of me. And so, you know, that Patreon is just, there's no chance of that. Like, they're supporting you because they want to support you. And so getting that kind of like biased but not biased view is really, really useful. Yeah.
Thank you. That's brilliant. I'm gonna sneak in another question as well, if that's
Do
okay.
it.
Um, Again, I'm making assumptions, but like even just based on my practice, I have lots of different things happening at different times,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I just wondered, how do you make it work in terms of like the time you dedicate to
Oh my
Patreon?
God. I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know. It just kind of happens. We were just talking about this before the call started, weren't we, Janine? I don't know. I think you have to, like you were saying, you just have to go with what works. Like my entire life, I mean, I used to be an academic in life sciences of all things, and even then, especially then, it was a whole mess. Like, it was a whole mess. I can't work a 9 to 5. I can't do those things. Like, being awake for you all right now was almost an issue. I My sleep schedule is like all over the place. You know, no circadian rhythm whatsoever, and I think learning to deal with that instead of fighting that and going like, you know, I must fit into this like regimented structure. Um, Instead of doing that, just like going, like flowing with it and understanding that, okay, I'm still awake at 4 a.m. working on a radio show. Cool. Let's see what happens. Like, yeah, just don't fight your own body in any way. And I think that is the key. Like, rather than trying desperately to plan all of the things that I'm doing, I have very like rudimentary like plans of what I'm going to do in the week. And but most of the time it's just really, really, I stream of consciousness, shove it all into my morning pages, which is a really, really good thing to do, by the way, for all creatives. Just write about 200 words every morning, completely off the cuff, completely from the heart. And then from that, lots of things come out. I think that we don't give ourselves enough credit, like our brains and hearts and souls, enough credit a lot of the times as artists. And it doesn't really make sense to me, and no shade to anyone who fits their practice into the normal modality of work, but it doesn't really make sense to me that if you're in a non-conformist career that you would stick to kind of conformist scheduling. But it's entirely up to you, obviously, whatever makes you feel more productive and more connected to yourself. But yeah, I just kind of keep on plodding along, girl. I don't look more than a day in front of me usually, because if I do, that's when the anxiety kicks in, and then the ego comes in and stops you and censors your work. That's how it happens for me. If I'm like, okay, I've got 8 hours, I'm going to work on my radio show for the next 8 hours, and I'm not going to stop, or like I'm going to take little 20-minute breaks, whatever. If I even go into the work with that kind of with that idea, it stifles it somehow and it warps it into something that it wasn't supposed to be. But if I'm, you know, I'm lying in bed and I'm like, I can't sleep, and then suddenly this piece of music comes into my head, or whatever, I'm thinking about my radio show for next month, and I'm feeling moved to do it. When you get that kind of feeling in your stomach of like, oh, I really need to do this, I need to move, that's what you should follow, I feel. Well, that's my own view, and that's how I do it. It's maybe not the best for just having a life, like doing things and getting stuff done and getting your grocery shopping done and stuff like that. But I don't know, for me, art always takes the priority, which, yes, maybe also a cautionary tale to just like look after yourself a little bit first, and make sure that you're doing all the self-care stuff that you need to. Yeah.
Yeah, does anyone from the group have a question or anyone to ask?
No questions. Love that for us.
I've got a wee question I could, it might be quite a basic one because I'm not super clear on how all the Patreon and stuff works. Is it all totally anonymous from the supporters? Do you have any idea like
It can
who
be.
they are?
So it can be. It's entirely up to them. So when they sign up, they could use that. You do need to use an email and stuff, and you do need to put in a name. But I have a couple of patrons who I don't know their real names, but I use whatever name that they've put on their account. So yeah, it can be anonymous on their side, but a lot of the times, I think what the kind of community that Patreon and Passion Economy platforms engender is a sense of openness, and so most of the time they won't want to be anonymous anyway. Yeah, like I said about just like wanting you to do well and wanting to support you, I think that kind of ties into that as well. But yeah, it's less so with the, like, I think like GoFundMe has an inbuilt feature to just donate anonymously. So it's not so much like that. GoFundMe is another great thing. Like, I just exhaust every crowdfunding opportunity you can get your hands on. I think for my piano, my upright piano, she was free on Gumtree. She was one of those free giveaways, but she needed to get here, and that was obviously like 200 odd quid, and I just did a little GoFundMe for that. So it's like there's different, you know, like if you've got costs for like a big cost, lump cost, then obviously Patreon's not really the place to do that. It's more of a steady income stream. So you can do Kickstarter, which I think for Kickstarter, I would be wary with Kickstarter because you have to reach your goal in order to get the funds that have been donated to you. But with GoFundMe, you will always just get whatever anyone donates to you. So if you have like a really like figured out, conceptualized project, then Kickstarter is for that, because you already have all of the merch ready to go for the different tiers. It's basically like the GoFundMe of like Passion Economy. Like Kickstarter is like a lump sum of crowdfunding, and then Patreon is a monthly kind of like income stream.
Cool.
And I can, in the after this event, I can put together a little resources of some of the different options that you have with crowdfunding and Passion Economy kind of subscription based things, just so that you can see what different options there are. There was also Creative Scotland did a matched crowdfunding thing. I don't know if you saw that, Callie,
I
with
didn't see that.
I think it was with Crowdfunder. So this is the second year they've done it, and I think that they will do it again. So it's worth kind of having a look at that. I'll try and find the link on Creative Scotland, but it was basically like if you reached a certain amount, I think it was maybe like £500 for the first bit, Creative Scotland would match that £500 with £500. And I think there was like 3 or 4 stages that you could go with a project. And it was obviously like Callie's practice is quite specific, and we're going to have a chance to go around the group of what everybody's working on at the moment and what their practice is. So everyone, I imagine, will have quite different, you know, ambitions for how they might use these things within their practice. But the Creative Scotland thing's quite good because you see very different examples of how people have used it to kind of reach a goal for a program or a project idea or working with a community or that kind of thing. So yeah,
That's so cool. I think that also it raises an important thing about match funding in general. All grants can be like, you can use match funding in all grant applications. And so if you do have a Patreon following, or you're doing a crowdfunding situation, that can always be put on, excuse me, on the budget, on your income table, and you can put it as match funding and, you know, pending. So you know, if you've got Patreon pledges already every month, then you can put it as guaranteed. And all grants are hugely benefited by having match funding, even if they say that it's not, even if they say on the guidelines, no, we don't, you know, we don't favorably weight our decision towards people with match funding. They do, they absolutely 100% do. And so any match funding that you can put on there, even if it is not guaranteed, just write that you've been planning this crowdfunding thing, and what the value is, what the goal value will be. And then it just shows that you're actually like trying out with the grant to make your own funds. So yeah, I think match funding, that's really, 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 really important. That's why for me, grants and Patreon have been a really synergistic kind of two things.
Could I ask a question? You'd mentioned you've been on over a year. Is that right? Over a year on Patreon. How long do you think it's taken you to sort of build up
Yeah.
your following? And did you, I don't know, was there, you'd mentioned about Amanda Palmer being really a good example to maybe look at. Is there anybody else that you'd maybe recommend as well?
So Night Vale and things like it, like podcasts that you like, are probably on Patreon as well. Any episodic art form that you like will probably be on Patreon as well. But also just look for musicians that you like and artists that you enjoy the work of. It is useful to look at like Gabrielle Motola, my friend and a really good photographer. It's been really interesting because, you know, she has a bunch of Instagram followers, like in the tens of thousands, and it's been interesting to see how her funnel works and talk to her about that and get a bit of advice on how to bring people through. Like, she does a Discord group with her patrons, and that's something that I've been wanting to do, but it's just so much time and additional work that I don't think it's that economically viable for my practice. But there are always different things for different art forms and different artists. And so she does a Discord group where she will invite all of the patrons in, and then they can all literally just discuss in a real-time chat everything that they've been working on, and her work and their work, and pretty much like this, but in a written form. Yeah, I think it is useful to look for other artists. Sorry, I can't really give you any good examples right now, apart from Gabrielle and Amanda.
No, that's loads. I've written quite a few down, so I can put that in the post-event email.
Cool.
I've got one more question. Sorry.
No, that's great.
It's more kind of a practical one. Again, I'm not sure what everyone's sort of structure is, if they're freelance or if they're employed or a bit of both. But I just wondered with Patreon, because it's like a sort of incremental income coming in every month, how do you put that on your tax return, or
Right. I mean, so I am really bad at I was really bad at being a businesswoman, and I just I'm on universal credit as well, so like that's I think a really common position for artists to be in, especially since the pandemic. But also universal credit has been hugely transformative for me, like being able to work full time on my practice. And I just had a meeting yesterday with them about the minimum income floor thing that's come in, about it's changing, and so I have a year to basically get my income to a level that's like a real person before they take me off UC. So I haven't done my self-assessment. I need to do my self-assessment, but every month on universal credit you report your income and expenses, and I've been basically just saving those screenshots and saving them in a document so that I can do it later. But yeah, you have to report your to HMRC. You report it as income, and it's just like any other self-employment.
Yeah. No, I just wondered if it was slightly different, because it's almost like a micro donation if it was classes.
Oh yeah, it's not classed as a grant or anything, but
Yeah.
grants don't affect government benefits and everything, so that's really great. Yeah, so I've got a year to figure my shit out. Let's go.
Well,
let's do this.
It's almost like a natural segue, because I was gonna wait to the end, but our next workshop that we've got for our network is with Emily Coltman, who's with Free Agent, and she's going to be talking about sort of almost like the tips and tricks of bookkeeping, so that your self-assessment isn't
I will
hell.
be there.
Yeah.
I will be there. I need
I'll,
that. so badly. Oh,
I'll send you the link. Emily's
thank
amazing,
you,
so she kind
thank you.
of really breaks it down a good way. And I'll send a link to everyone. But that's the 24th of March.
24th.
Does anyone have a last question or anything for Callie before we do the next part? Yeah,
I've
Ellen.
got another wee one. It's about numbers and what would be normal to expect, or just what happened to you in terms of like getting people in. Was it like nothing, then everything at once popped off, or was it like
Right.
3 people
Yeah,
every week? You know, how did that go?
that's a great question. I think working for Amanda was really, really useful. Doing anything you can do to like get yourself out there a bit more. Ask for help. Like, just ask everyone that you know for help. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Anyone that you know that has like a network or a connection to more people that can get your work in front of more people. That's really, really useful. Like I said, the funnel is the most important thing. Just keep working on your social media. As miserable as that sounds, I know it sounds kind of miserable. Try and find the joy in it. Try and use it as an extension, another dimension of your practice, an outward facing dimension. And that joy kind of keeps the motivation to keep working on it. There's some lovely bird song. I can hear some bird song behind someone. That's really, really nice. But yes, the numbers, it's kind of been like an exponential, not quite exponential, but definitely it's increasing. And as long as you're staying like steady with your work, you're making sure that you're posting regularly, and that can just be once a month, like once or twice a month. And yeah, I think just keeping the faith in your own work, and like I said before about excuse me, about making sure that you're staying true to what you want to do, rather than thinking about followers and thinking about how to get more people in. Just follow your heart. Just follow your heart.
Always.
Yes.
Cool. Thanks.
No worries.
Well, thank you so much, Callie. It's been really great to hear about your experience, and also thank you for answering all our questions. So the next part of this morning is when we get to talk to each other as well. But I thought, because it was maybe a bit early this morning, I forgot to ask everyone to introduce themselves. So apologies, Callie, that you didn't know necessarily who was in the room with you. But I just wondered if maybe we could, before I'm going to move us into breakout rooms of twos, so that we can have a chance to chat to each other and network a little. But if people wouldn't mind saying who you are and maybe a little bit about your practice. Who would like to go first? Thanks, Ellen. You've unmuted. Go for it.
No worries. I'll have a go. So yeah, I'm Alan. I am an actor first and foremost. That's how I think of myself. But acting is probably the smallest part of what I do. I do. Oh no, that's not true. Sorry, I ramble as well. Fun fact. I always have to rein that in. I am also a filmmaker, recently a writer. Woohoo! That's been a big one I've been working towards. So that's good. Visual artist, arts facilitator. I do lots of stuff with GCAN. I work with the Bold Collective, the youth group, a lot. I was just with them yesterday for a workshop on leading workshops, which was very cool. I think that about sums it up. I do lots of stuff. Classic creative. My day job to keep the money coming in at the moment is I work in an escape room, which is quite good fun. Yeah, that can be a really interesting one. I think I've covered.
Thank you, Ellen. That sounds like you're a very busy person. lots happening. Can I pass on to Naomi? Would you be happy to say?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Naomi. I've been actually working for an arts organisation for nearly the last year and a half, and I'm thinking about going freelance again. So more in the kind of producing aspect. And I've realised I'm really missing the facilitation and also that time and space for my own practice. So actually, this is the first networking meeting I've come to. And I moved to Glasgow just before the pandemic. So yeah, it's all been a bit chaotic. So I'm kind of starting to take those steps now. And so yeah, thanks for having me. And it was a really, really great, Callie, just to I guess your enthusiasm as well, and just to feel like, okay, yeah, this is something that I want to start making those steps towards again, and to hear everybody else as well. So thanks for having me.
That's the best thing I could ever hear, Naomi. Thank you so much. It's literally all I ever want is just to help other people do their own art and inspire them to do that. That's really the most satisfying thing I could hear on a Tuesday morning. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Naomi, and yeah, welcome. This is your first networking. That's brilliant. I'm sure there's other places that we can recommend as well that you might want to kind of connect to. Karen, do you like
Hi, thanks. Hi everyone, thanks again as well. Inspiring talk stuff, coming on and doing that. I'm a photographer, so I'm not sure how the Patreon thing, so I'd be interested in your friend, you say is as a photographer, how that would work in terms of it's not kind of something I'm doing all the time. But I have been doing, I live in the Athletes Village, and I did get some funding from Creative Scotland to produce pictures of my neighbours and their kind of reaction and how we got through lockdown. And I'm hoping to build on that. So it's just trying to find, but I just can't, I got help with the funding application. It's not something I want to spend any time doing at all. I'm not interested. So it's finding a way of trying to get all of that funding and everything, but somebody else doing it. And it's not something I'll do. So it's just facing up, like you were saying, face up to who you are, what you can and can't do. I'm a photographer. I'm interested in people and their stories, and that's all we are. That's all the world is, just our stories and how we represent them. And so, yeah, it's just interesting to try and find ways now. I can again get somebody else to do the social media side of things on that way. I've got the social media going on, but it's not getting me any work or that sort of thing. So yeah, I was just trying to connect all those dots. So thank you for all the little different connections and things. Really, really helpful. So cheers.
No worries, Karen. Thank you so much for saying that. I do think that you need to connect with Gabrielle. Gabrielle Mazzola. She sounds like she does very, very similar to work to you. So it'd be a great kind of like gauge. I love the sound of your work, by the way. Oh my goodness, that's like, you know, like Humans of New York kind of thing.
Sure.
I absolutely love that kind of modality of photography. The way that Gabrielle works is she'll show kind of like non-color graded shots and color graded shots, and like show her process, and she'll like have like pictures of her studio, and then she'll do the Discord chats. So she'll talk to just the Patreon community about this particular photograph that she took and just post it. And then she'll say, okay, so this is what was going on with this story. And you sound very, very similarly motivated by stories, which I think is a very photographer thing. Document, like kind of documentarianism, like documenting everything. And yeah, really, that is honestly, Karen, like you're in such good stead for Patreon. Like it's really, really
okay.
So yeah, okay, definitely I'll send Gabrielle's contact details to Janine, who will get to you.
Perfect. Cheers.
No worries.
Thank you, that's ace. So last but not least, Sylvia, you'd be happy to say hello.
Yeah, hiya. Sorry, sometimes I need to stop my camera because my internet is unstable. So just to kind of, thank you so much. Actually, it's very thought-provoking. I still need to figure out the way I could potentially put into place, because I think, being funding restrained is very important. In fact, now I'm like, I think I need to find a part-time jobs because everything keeps increasing. But so it's good a way, not just rely too much on funding. But yeah, so I started my project called Alternative. And I am basically a community development worker and with visual art and art therapy. So I'm trying to do workshops which combined kind of the three of them. And so my hope is to bring more creativity into communities and kind of help as well to step away from, people, when you say artists, they're like, nope, not me. Because there is so much kind of like stigma around arts, and it's not for you. So it's kind of like want to help reclaiming the arts, which is kind of making accessible to all abilities eventually. Anyway, building communities which are more stronger and resilient, because I believe arts can do that. So that's kind of like my mission. Still working on the way kind of forwards, but I'm doing some project just now, and yeah, and that's me.
Sounds incredible, Sylvia. I am a trustee of the Spit It Out project. I don't know if you've heard of the Spit It Out project, but we're a charity who, a community charity, and like an community arts organization. We focus on utilizing creative practice as a means of recovery from trauma and real vulnerable self-expression through all different creative mediums. So it'd be really great to connect with you and see if you'd like to do a workshop or anything like that, because right now we're offering paid, and that goes for every single person in this room. We're offering there's paid opportunities with Spit It Out right now for you to do a workshop on your whatever you want. You can send in a little application on the official website. I'll send the website to Janine.
Thank you.
And yeah, it sounds like our aims are really, really aligned. So it'd be really great to have a meeting with you about that.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you. That's ace. I'll definitely send that to the wider network as well. I think they'd be really interested.